Hello, hello. Oh, geez. How's everyone doing?
Is it over here? Yeah.
All right, we're here. We're going to talk about Q4 today, particularly in performance marketing. Before we get into that, we'd like to do some brief intros. So, Megan, do you want to kick us off?
Hello. Hi, I'm Meghan Holzhauer. I'm the CMO of State Bags. We're the original family bag brand. Started with kids' backpacks, but have expanded into bags for the whole family with a focus on travel and everyday.
Awesome. Hello, I'm Nima. I'm the founder of Pearmill. We're a performance marketing agency. We work with a lot of DTC brands as well as technology companies, a lot of venture-backed startups, and we're a full-service brand. So media buying, creative production, conversion rate optimization, attribution modeling, media mix modeling, all the things that you need to do performance marketing.
Cool. Hey guys, my name is Camelia. I'm the head of data science and analytics at Black Crow AI. So Black Crow is an AI platform that helps Shopify brands increase revenue, ROAS, and overall return customers through our proprietary machine learning models and identity graphs.
Amazing. And I'm Trent, performance marketing lead at Live It Up. So before we jump in, we're going to talk about Q4, talk about processes and planning for that, particularly for performance marketing. I wanted to share a couple stats. Got this from eMarketer for Black Friday weekend, and particularly Black Friday the day of. So the e-commerce expected sales on Black Friday this year from 2024 is 10.7 billion. That's up 5% year over year. And Cyber Monday is 13.9, basically 14 billion. And that is up 8%, roughly. So the expectation, at least from eMarketer, from a report in July 2024, is that this will be another strong sales year in Black Friday. There's definitely some challenges, potentially with CPMs, which we'll talk about in the political sphere. But with all of that, maybe Megan, we can start with you and chat through, how are you thinking about Q4 planning, particularly for advertising, and how should brands think about it as the season approaches?
Right, so I am putting a lot of thought and planning into the rest of the year, also planning next year. So right now is a very heavy planning moment, but it's critical. I am, frankly, one of the things that I'm doing a lot right now is podcast listening and going to these panels and just taking notes down of all of the things that I should be thinking about. So I'm making checklists for all of my partners for pulling from all of the insights from podcasts, from these panels, all of the minutia things that so I'm micromanaging for this because when something goes wrong on a random Tuesday in September, which is our lowest intent, it's okay, we can fix it. Let's figure it out. If when something goes wrong, on Black Friday, that is you need to understand what exactly to look for right away and what exactly it is. So we're creating protocols and lists and very specific things that every channel needs to be thinking about. It's super unsexy. It's everything are the data feeds flowing correctly, which we actually work with both of these guys. Going and having those doing the grunt work, or asking Nima to do the grunt work of making sure that all of the data is flowing appropriately to minimize any risks during the highest intent season. And then as it relates specifically to Meta and what we're doing right now. So we're using right now as the moment to be testing and iterating. So it's, what is the creative testing that we can be doing right now that's informing what our top creatives are going to be during the holidays, and really thinking specifically about the products that we're going to be highlighting, and how can we start testing around the creatives that will what are the early indications of what's going to be working for the holidays. And on the creative side, we're doing incrementality testing. We're taking a look at which of the what signals do we need to be giving to be feeding into Meta to get the to be targeting the correct people and having the best returns on our investments. So right now is very much a testing and learning with a specific idea of like what are the things we really need to know as we head into the holidays that we can be testing right now. So those are some of the things. Like it's super unsexy. I really liked the thought in the prior panel. Like you don't necessarily need to be going over the top with like a specific like holiday photo shoot. Like it feels really like that's never really worked for us. We have done those. You can't use those assets for very long. So it's like, what are you doing graphically to indicate that this is a holiday ad? What can you be doing with your copy? And yeah, so that's a few things. Like we can go into more details, but it's extensive. It is like, what does every single channel need to be doing correctly at every single point, like along like now and into the holiday season.
Yeah, I almost feel like the creatives, if you take your top performers from the year and then somehow theme it out for the holiday, works better than just doing like this whole net new batch of creatives that are untested. Nima, is there anything else you'd like to add on Q4 approach and planning?
Yeah, I think the way I would think about it is sort of dividing up what you were saying across like infrastructure, process, and scenarios, right? So infrastructure being, are you tracking is it in place correctly? Do we know and understand the mix of channels you want to be spending on? What the process would be, what are the different areas that you could be failing, and then what is the internal process that you'll sort of like cover these? We were just talking about, we have a brand that does these fake scenarios where one day they'll just say, hey, we have a press release that's come out and it's very bad about our brand. And then how are we going to act today? And so they'll literally go through these like sort of drills to be prepared for the next quarter. And then the last piece is scenarios. And we tend to do this a lot as performance marketers. And it was mentioned in the last panel as well, is, hey, you want to plan out the scenarios. And so then you know ahead of time, what would you do if ROAS was lower than you expected it or higher than you expected it? So we have usually at least 3 different sort of scenarios on what and where your capital is going to get deployed. If it's doing well, what would you do on top of it? If it's not doing well, how would you act and react to that information? So if you have these 3 things in place, I think you can have a pretty successful quarter, but a lot of planning has to go in place. And for performance channels, at the very least, there's also sort of dynamics of machine learning and how much it costs you to get impressions. And so you want to get started pretty early to warm up the audiences. But yeah, that's all I had.
Amazing. For your scenarios you're doing, are you looking at like building into a curve, knowing that conversion rates are going to be higher over Black Friday and Cyber Monday? Like, how should marketers, if we're trying to plan our spend over the quarter, kind of think about those scenarios and like, particularly over time, like what's the best way to kind of look at those things?
Yeah, the scenarios just look like spreadsheets of like sometimes daily and sometimes weekly cost dynamics, clicks, all the way to conversions and ROAS. And you want to basically make some set of assumptions and then do plus minus on those, right? So then you're like, hey, I have some error bars that I'm playing with. What are the error bars we're comfortable with using past data? And then you categorize them into like, well, this is what best case scenario looks like. This is what mid looks like. This is what a bad scenario looks like. And then here are the actions that we would take based on those scenarios and where we are on a given day. And then you update them as data comes in, right? So this is like a living and breathing sort of scenario planning thing where you go through the quarter as reality comes in. And so you sort of check your assumptions as more data comes in.
It's amazing. And Camelia, for Q4, how is Black Crow? How are you thinking about it in terms of your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think on top of what Meghan said, I think a lot of what we're doing is making sure that our models are working really well so that we're not actually building any new features. We're making sure that they're super strong, we're auditing them, and the most important thing that you can be doing is around monitoring. So kind of as what Nima said is you're actually having a really good understanding of what your attribution was throughout the entire year, and you're able to kind of run time series around that to see what seasons are actually performing. And so then you kind of know what to expect during Black Friday and during these seasons where you have high traffic and you can almost consider them as outliers. So really being able to understand kind of how your population is changing during these very high traffic seasons, and then making sure that all of the systems that you have in place, that the budgeting, that the experiments, that the ads, everything that you're doing is kind of rock solid so that they're not necessarily new surprises or nothing kind of goes wrong.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, the only thing I'll add, and we can kind of move on to the political spending this year and CPMs, is Black Friday, as the first panel mentioned, is on the 29th this year. Last year was the 24th. So as we're doing scenario planning, I think it'll be important to shift things a few days. And I think that period leading up to like Black Friday weekend is always the period I get the most nervous. I just see like CACs rising, but I'm just like, hold the spend, because I know it's all gonna come through. So that's just a note to make. And then building top of funnel ahead of time. Like I've usually seen as the email programs go in D2C, so does the brand. So I always try to figure out unique ways to build email funnels, whether that's through YouTube partnerships, quiz funnels, et cetera. So I think email's a big one. With that political impact on CPMs, how should marketers and brands be thinking about that? Is this something we should be concerned about, or how are you approaching it?
Okay, I'm not the expert on how we should be thinking about this. This is actually my it's a very strange year. It's a very unique year, particularly charged election happening, and more political spending than ever. The way that I'm thinking about it is keeping an eye on our performance analytics by state, knowing that there are very specific states that are going to be the focus for political spending, so those being the swing states. But we actually, states, seasonality is, the holiday is a big season, but back to school is an even bigger season for us. And there's also another by state element there, because different states go back to school at different times. So this year, one thing that we did with the Pearmill team is we started looking as schools go back in session, backpack sales start declining for us because they're already back in school. So what we ended up doing, in August, is starting to look at our performance by state and which states were declining most quickly. We started turning ads off in those states, so that we were not just wasting money on states that had already gone back to school. So in a similar vein, keeping an eye on our performance by state will allow us to understand what states are too expensive for us to be advertising in, and whether we're getting the ROI on those states. So that's the biggest kind of solve for me right now is to be looking at the data like geographically. So to kind of, there's also the element of like, who is your customer? Like for us, our primary customers are coastal. They're New York, Los Angeles, like more urban settings, and it might end up not being as big of a deal for us. But I think just like understanding who your customer is, and we'll also just all find out what happens after the election. So pulling that messaging up earlier, and that's a very small. We have the shortest possible holiday season, the smallest, the fewest number of days that is possible between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So we have a lot of things against us this year. So it's really about pushing as hard as you can, like in the moments that you can, to get the most out of the holiday season.
Awesome, thank you. Nima, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'll just add one other dimension to all of that, is just the channels where the money's going, right? I think we were talking about this. There's roughly, $5 billion being spent around the time leading up to the elections, and most of that is going to go towards TV, and some of it will go towards like performance channels like Meta, and there's also a party split. So Republicans are going to do more TV versus the Democrats are going to do a lot more Meta in comparison this year, which was the flip. In 2016, it was the other way around. And so it's an interesting change there. But I think knowing what the environment is when your ad is being shown is sort of the important part, and being mindful of that. So in creative production, I would also always care a lot about, well, if you're going to be mentioning things like the election, then you should be careful about what you're doing. We've even in the past, this is our second time going through the elections. You basically want to, I would like put on the TV constantly to see what they're running and ask other people if they're seeing ads, just to get a sense of the environment and what other people are seeing on on their TVs or on their phones from campaigns, and then match the, for lack of a better word, vibe of what they're doing in a way that is not like tone deaf. And so that's the only thing I would add. And then leading up to it, I think hopefully you'll have also like a set of scenarios you plan for these. Like, what if things go wrong? What if things aren't as obvious? Like, what if the results aren't going to come back for another 3 weeks and the whole period gets extended? Start thinking about those scenarios and what would you do differently, if anything. Maybe you're not doing anything differently, but it's just having that as part of your scenario planning, I think, will be helpful.
That makes sense. Thank you. I feel like every year there's some CPM risk. Like last year, Temu was spending a bunch of money. This year it's political season. So it's like, what are some channels that we could potentially shift into that are CPM hedges? I know the post-pilot folks are here, so direct mail is a good option. I'd like to use like YouTube influencer partnerships, which is digital, but I think it's unique and outside of the Meta ecosystem where we know the CPMs are going to get really high, right? So what other options like that? Kind of shifting gears to measurement and methodology. I would love to hear your thoughts, Camelia, on how do you think about multi-touch attribution, and how do you think about incrementality or media mix modeling? And maybe for the audience, if you could give like a brief definition of each and then go in the use cases for each.
Sure. So I think what I'll do is really kind of compare attribution methodologies versus MMMs or marketing mix models. I think what I'll start with is that there is not one method that's better than the other. I think like as a marketer, you're as good as your toolkit, so having both is really powerful. Attribution is really just understanding the effect of your touch point on conversion, on your purchase, on your sign up, right? So attribution is really good to have for your short-term marketing strategy and being able to understand in real time how to allocate your budget. And so you can do this manually, you can do this via tools like Black Crow, Triple Whale, Northbeam, and I think it's super important to have, especially as you're entering these kind of more chaotic seasons. MMMs, which are very near to my and dear to my heart, which are more kind of statistical analysis, predictive models, that's really for your long-term strategy. And the power of MMMs is really being able to understand the effect of marketing efforts and non-marketing efforts on conversions. So really the power there is to be able to understand, okay, what is the effect of something like pricing, packaging, distribution, holiday, traffic, on the overall success of your campaign and conversions. So overall, I would say definitely invest in both. There are many tools and many frameworks to be able to go ahead and build this out within your strategy. But both, in my experience, I've seen have been very powerful if you're able to kind of leverage them correctly.
That's great, thank you. And for Meghan and Nima, I know we chatted a little bit earlier. You guys are doing some incrementality testing. Is there any examples or anything you'd like to share there?
Okay, yeah. So one thing that we're doing right now is we have a test set up in Meta with 3 different parts. One is the normal 7-day viewed. Was it 7-day click, 1-day view? Yeah, 7-day click, 1-day view. The 7-day click, 1-day view. One that is 1-day click, and one that is what was the third one? I'm forgetting what our third test group is, but what we're trying to understand is which of those 3 models gives us the most incremental customer revenue, and that's not just like the that's the how our ads are optimized, not how. Not like just how we're looking at the data. That's like the specific thing. It's like how are we optimizing? What are we asking Meta to optimize for? And what we found is that during our highest intent seasons, which is back to school and then going into the holiday, what we found is that our view through data was like we were becoming a bit over indexed on view through data, and what that means is that there's more overlap across the channels. It's getting pretty technical. Definitely come up and ask me, and definitely Nima, these folks. But what we need to do is kind of is understand do we need to be narrowing down our overlap, and the answer is very likely yes. So if we're telling Meta to focus its efforts on driving driving sales and driving purchases that are primarily click-based, then that is going to help us, we hypothesize, with the overlap. So that's one really specific thing that we're doing now so that we can understand what that looks like and how we want to optimize heading into the holidays to minimize overlap in the highest intent season.
That's great. I'll be excited
I'm like, does
to
that
hear.
make sense?
No,
I know.
totally.
Like sometimes just like breaking it down that way.
No, I've heard a few folks doing these tests and like trying to move off of any view-based attribution in Meta so that they actually go after like the hard click purchases, which are more incremental. So yeah, as you guys get data, I think it'd be great to hear how that goes.
Yeah, we're getting close.
Amazing. Nima, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I think like the incrementality as a whole category of toolkit is quite important as you scale up. One of the things that I try to think about, the way I distinguish between attribution models and marketing mix models for performance marketing specifically, is attribution sort of giving you the current state of things, what is happening, where are people coming from, and how are they converting, and marketing mix modeling is going to help you, where should I put the next dollar if I were to add a new dollar to the budget. And so that actually is a very hard question to answer. The marginal CAC changes over time, and so you will not be able to get the same CAC out of the same channel if you just double your spend. I'm sure everyone's experienced that consistently. And so having a process for testing out ideas on how to get the channels to give you the same output when you increase the budget is quite important. And so this is one of the levers that you can pull on, and it's probably the most important ones as you scale up the company, and then your reliance also becomes more and more on these channels.
Awesome. Camelia, is there anything you'd like to wrap with on this topic? All right, amazing. All right, we're getting the Q&A pushed here, so we're going to go to questions. Is there any questions from the audience that we can take? Yes?
So, you guys said that the CPM is going to go up because it's an election year, but you suggested like an alternative solution. You said influencers should YouTube shop. How do you know you're hitting the same demographics that you need to? Because part of the reason the campaigns are spending so much on that is that it's the same, a lot of it is the same target demographic.
Sure.
Marketers are trying to reach, like Meghan. And so when you switch to those other avenues, how do you make sure that you still think that people need to?
Yep.
Because the people watch TV are not the people who are going to be on YouTube, right? Like there isn't going to be a huge overlap, or if you move over to any other channels. So I'm just wondering what would you say to that?
Yeah. I think, so Postpilot's actually pretty great for this. It's basically like Klaviyo for direct mail. So they have access to your site traffic. They have access to your email flows. So they like know who your audience is, and they can build lookalikes off of that. For YouTube, it's a bit more challenging, right? Because you're like partnering with specific creators. How I've done it in the past is like get the audience insights. What is my audience? What's my age? What's the demo? What's like the income range I'm looking for? Where do they hang out in terms of the geolocations? And how does that map to the creator? And it's still like pretty manual of like them sending over screenshots of their YouTube dashboard. So that's one way, is like, is their audience, like do I think my audience is on this channel? And then the second thing is like, what other products is the creator selling? Are they selling high like luxury items, or are they going after like lower price items, right? And does my brand align with the other products they're mentioning and advertising, or is it like a complete mismatch? So those are some ways I've tried to like parse in on like, okay, I want to go after this channel for my audience, but I'm not sure how any of the others on the panel think about that.
I mean, I would agree with what you're saying. You're not necessarily going to know exactly the same people here, on different channels. I think it's about a mix, like and really thinking about like just knowing that and considering who their audience is, and even if it's not the exact same audience. Another thing that that a lot of people don't always think about is not everybody's on Meta. You can actually hit a lot more people by going elsewhere. TV, YouTube influencers, not everybody's scrolling Instagram. A lot of people aren't. There's actually a lot more people who are stepping away from the platform. There's an age range thing. So really having a deep understanding of your customers and where they are. Customer interviews is a great place to learn that. We try and interview a few of our customers at least every month to understand like what are they consuming media-wise, who are the influencers they're following, what are the brands they love, so we can get a better picture, like map out, like who are these people, and what do they care about, and how can we show up in new and different ways for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think like increasing CPMs also, I want to like remind everyone that it's like the boogeyman that everyone is scared of, but also at the same time you get all these other gains. And so the mix ends up working out, but it is like stressful because that does happen. And if you haven't figured out the other levels in time, it's going to be really hard to turn the ship around. But if you've been planning, the existing channels tend to be very helpful and can perform. I would be skeptical of net new channels that you've never tried, generally speaking, going into Q4. I think you can make those bets, but as a mix of your marketing, I would make sure they're like sub 5% of the spend. And maybe if you've done them enough over the past, I think that makes sense. But it'll be hard for me to be comfortable saying, oh yeah, we should spend like 20% of our budget on channels that we have very little data to support that they're going to work or not.
I think that's a really great point. We last year, we decided to allocate a very small budget to TikTok. We hadn't advertised on TikTok before. It literally did nothing, nothing. Yeah. And then we did it again. We did another small budget during back to school, and it worked. So if you are going to try something new, keep it small until you know.
Yeah, and I think kind of similar to what you said, like before allocating budget anywhere, it's really important to have like very strong customer segmentation models to be able to understand each of your audiences and then across the channels, right? So like your audience maybe in Meta is going to be different from your audience in YouTube, and then being able to do a holistic comparison, because that'll give you so much more foresight as to what you can expect at the channel level.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yep.
We tested CTV with Pearmill. They were wonderful at helping us get on board very quickly. And on the platform called Mountain, MNTN, it was at the end of our season. We got some interesting early results to allow us to think about. We won't do it during holiday again, kind of because of the thing. We're still in that. Does this work for us? And it's going to be really crowded, but I think like heading into the earlier side of back to school next year, it will be something that we will step into again. But we're also actually Nick Sharma introduced us to a vendor or like a partner for linear TV that I think is really interesting. We're a little bit like, I think we need to get another year or two under our belts, but there's pretty different audiences, so it's interesting to look at both.
Yeah, I think it's an audience question on where you would spend the money. The sort of positive part about CTV and a bunch of the sort of partners that work in that world, like Mountain or Totari and so on, is that so you can really think of it as a performance channel. They're quite good at helping you think in the same lens that you've been thinking about when you've been on Meta and so on. So commonly we'll see people start there. And then as you build the sort of muscle for creative production, because it's like a whole new beast, you can then move on to linear, but it does depend on your audience. If you're leaning older, I would probably go straight to linear. And so it just depends on what you're doing.
Awesome. All right, well, we're getting the boot, so thank you for the time, and yeah, we'll see you around.